Hey guys, Jen's here. So looking a little rough today, but getting you the content is more important than looking cute, right? That's what I say, and I'm sticking to it. So just recently had a call with our mentors, kind of downloading on our first arrest at the house, and what we've learned from that, and what we learned from that follow-up conversation. So I want to share with you guys. So we'll call this the 3 lessons I learned from our first arrest. Um, so Saturday night, I think it was Saturday night, sitting down eating with my family, about to take a bite of this delicious taco. Got halfway through it, and my phone rings. It's house manager. I'm like, this is not a how you doing call. So taco down, go to my office, and it turns out that one of our new guests had locked the other resident and the house manager out of the house and was claiming that he owned the place. This was completely unexpected. I mean, I've heard of this happening before, of course, and didn't think that we were immune to it. Just didn't think that it would be this guy. Um, so we, we did our typical, we did our interviews, our background check. The guy sounded great on paper, everything checked out. I will say that we, what's the word? Strayed from the protocol a little bit. Things are kind of a case by case basis. He was coming off the street. He had no criminal history. We had feedback from the community that had been at the area where they were clearing a bunch of homeless people out, and they were giving a lot of them a hard time, arresting people. They just gave this guy a nod, like, move along. You've never been any trouble to us. Was the indication that this person got, like, clearly this guy hadn't been an issue before, so the cops are just letting him go. So with that feedback and speaking to him in his interview and having him come into the home and drug test and do everything else that is required for the intake, he had been in the house for a couple of days, and the house manager even reported, like, the very next day, the day after the first night that he'd stayed there, the next day he went on a job, like a day labor job, was a great worker, had a great attitude. Then over the course of the next 2 days, he went to meetings, he was great. And then on the third day, he had said something to the house manager about that the house manager owed him rent and that this was his place or something like that. And the house manager thought, like, this guy kind of like thought the guy was messing with him, like thought it was a joke. Well, to fast forward the story so this video doesn't get too long, when they invited this guest to a meeting that day, he said no. So the house manager and another guest went to a meeting, and I'm not doing very good about fast forwarding. Point is, the other guest was dropped off back at the house after the meeting, and the house manager got an invite to go to a restaurant, go to IHOP. He gets a call from the other guest saying, hey, dude told me he owns a place and locked me out of the house. So house manager goes over there, can't get in. And from there, the cops show up, and I don't know if I have time to go into all of that, but basically let me just tell you what the first lesson was. Number one is marketing and clarifying who you're going to allow into the house, into the criteria. And we had already started tweaking that based on some prior experiences we had had, but just clarifying to the people that we were reaching out to and updating our website saying sobriety is a requirement to get into the house. We'd preferably like somebody who's been through a medical detox or a program. I think that preference is, we're going to put more emphasis on that preference now. And it's not just that we can't, this kind of validated our reasons and reinforced our commitment to this. We can't, unfortunately, just take people off of the streets, because what happened was see, I knew I was going to bounce around if I didn't I was so excited to get this information out to you that I didn't get like real strong notes to follow along. So please bear with my stream of consciousness here for a little bit. And maybe I should just tell you the whole story. So on this particular evening, this man was claiming that he owned the house, that he was the god of everything, threw a fake air grenade, pretended like he had a grenade, like was making threats to the house manager, threw the air grenade out through the door. Like in his mind, he was blowing them up and keeping them away. The house manager had just recently, he was making, the guy that had locked the house up was making threats to the house manager, obviously, who was trying to get in. We have Wi-Fi locks on all of the doors, but they all have deadbolts on them as well, except for one. And of course, that evening, that one door without the deadbolt is the one Wi-Fi lock that had been giving us trouble. So we're can't get into the home, and maybe in the end that was a godsend that we couldn't get in. But we called the police. The police show up, and we had gotten to the point where, you know, they're not going to break in or anything, because despite what we're telling them about the paperwork we have in place and what the situation is at the home, what purpose it serves, how long he had been there, they're saying that this is a civil matter. Now, that's something that we'll do more research on, and I'll follow up in a different video, because I would like to talk to some more people in the city government, I would like to talk to the police, their higher ups, and see, maybe explain, have them give them a chance to actually go through our paperwork and talk to them about it, to see if in the future the police that show up will be given the authority to go in and handle it as a criminal trespassing. But what they were telling us was that it was a civil dispute, even though we showed them the paperwork where it was a licensee and yada yada. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I am glad that they talked us out of, because here's the deal. If the cops are not going to go in and get him, even though we said he's a threat to himself and others, I don't think that the cops are going to do anything if they didn't witness the threat. And at this point, the guy was like laying low and just being quiet in his bed. So we, sorry, I have a house manager texting me right now. So what we were going to do is actually break a window to get into the house, because I didn't want the house manager and this other guest to be homeless for the evening or have to go somewhere. Hindsight, I mean, we're all trying to hindsight, maybe if this didn't go the way it did, maybe we would have just had to get a hotel room for them that evening. So the house manager was actually going to just break a window next to this one door to get in, and, you know, get some tape to make sure it didn't fly everywhere. And we were discussing this. I was on speakerphone. We were discussing this while the cops were there. And I am thankful that they were able to talk us out of that, because what they explained is, hey, because I was trying to make sure that my house manager wasn't going to get in trouble for breaking this window, since he was being instructed to do so by the owner of the home. But what the cop actually said was, you know, we don't know if this person is on the other side of the window and going to get hit with any glass, or if they're going to come running to the window and step in the glass. And then, of course, we have other issues. Who knows how that could go. So we hesitated, and that gave me some time to think. I just on a Hail Mary went to that other lock that didn't have the deadbolt on our Wi-Fi app. And I was able, which I didn't think I was able to do. I thought that the lock was just not connecting, but somehow it worked. Like, I'm 3.5 hours away from this house. Somehow it did work and got the lock back online, and I was able to re-enter the house manager's entry code. So he was able to get in. But I'm so grateful that the timing just worked out, because had I been able to do that or tried that earlier without the cops there, this could have been a different situation, and it could have been an altercation between the guest and the house manager. Because when the code worked and he opened the door, the guest came charging at him. He stepped behind the cops, and the guy ended up charging the cops. Now, that then is why he got arrested. If that hadn't happened, then I mean, I don't know, he could still be there today. So what is my point? So basically, this guy had like a psychotic break, and there was nothing that we saw leading up to this that that let us know that this is something that we should be watching out for. But if we were only accepting people that had come out of, been referred by a case manager, then we would know about this history, and we would have known that this could have been a risk, and we would have done things differently. So again, I'm going to tie that back into the lesson number one is in the marketing and clarifying who you can take, what the criteria is, and then sticking to it. And something else that I learned while talking to our mentors about that is that, we already say you have to be sober, you have to pass a drug test. Sorry, we're getting ready for school to start, and all the kids are finding out who their teachers are. So I don't know if you heard that yelling. Do have to have a drug test, and we have some hard nose in the criminal history. But then one thing that they brought up is that if this person is not referred by a case manager or a caseworker or another program, that we can have them be required to take it to do an amendment. So tired. They can be required to have why can't I say that? They can be required to have a mental evaluation at the hospital. So lesson number one, marketing and intake process needed to make some tweaks there. And go ahead, you might get caught up in wanting to help everyone, but the truth of the matter is we're not equipped to help everyone. So we need to be more selective in who we can take in. The second is the locks. Now we know that we could have worked that out. If the Wi-Fi, it's kind of spotty sometimes. If the Wi-Fi is gonna, if the technology is gonna work with you, but what we should have, because one of the issues was the house managers, like he has all of the keys. I have all of the keys, but I'm 3.5 hours away. And I was considering like, oh man, do I have to leave my family right now and drive 3 hours to deal with this situation while there's a standoff at the house for 3 hours? I didn't think that was really going to be necessary, but the house manager's batch of keys are locked up in his office. So that doesn't do us much good. So we need to reinstall a lockbox on the outside so that if anything happens again, there is a lockbox available to get in there. Again, in this case, I'll have to think about if I would send the house manager in another time. You just have to take these things on a case-by-case basis. In this case, it's probably best that the authorities showed up and that's how it was dealt with. So lockbox, even though you got all Wi-Fi, high-tech locks on the outside, keep an old school backup. And then study up on property codes. So, and your tenant law. We have paperwork that should protect us, and make it a criminal trespassing issue if somebody has broken the rules or for whatever reason is asked to leave. The paperwork is pretty tight in that if they F up in any way, or if we just so decide that it's time for them to go, that they need to go when they are asked to leave. However, like I said, the authorities said that it was still a civil matter. So here's what I've learned from that. We just need to go back and understand the property codes and the tenant laws a little bit better. Things that came out of this were that if you have a situation like this, the first thing that you need to make clear is that the person is being a threat to themselves and others, that they have been asked several times to leave. And there was one other thing that I wanted to make a point of. Oh, and also in this case, he had only been there 2 or 3 days, and I don't know if that was stressed enough, because anything 1 week or less is considered, or 7 days or less is considered a guest, and a short-term stay. And I don't know if that was really being acknowledged in our case. So we'll see what comes of that in the future. But one thing that we learned while kind of debriefing on this and having a discussion about it is that, FYI, and for those of you who aren't in Texas, I'm sorry if this doesn't apply, you'll need to go look up your own codes, but in Texas, only a lease of more than 1 year actually needs to be in writing. Anything less than that is an at-will tenant. So that was very interesting to learn. And then I need to read up and see get some clarification on this, but it seems like potentially where it gets fuzzy is that even though he had only been there for 2 or 3 days, the impression I got from the authorities was that it was like a vampire. We had invited him over the threshold, and so that was it, because we welcomed him in. So I was like, well, how can a guest have so many rights to your place and you can't get them out? It sounds like potentially because even though he was out of his mind, I don't know if I already told you, he said he was God of everything, he owned the house, but because he made that claim of ownership, that somehow blurs the line between a short-term stay, like just because he uttered the words that he owned the house. And I'm going to dig into this deeper. Switched it to the oh my gosh, switched it from a criminal trespassing issue to a civil issue in the eyes of the authorities. So just be aware of that. Like I said, I'll look for more clarification and share that later. And so what that means is, since it's not criminal trespassing, where this ended is the house manager ended up pressing charges because he may encounter the guy is in jail right now, with no bond. I don't know what happened once he went to jail. So it shouldn't be an issue for a bit, but the house manager is very likely to see him out in the city. And so he felt that it was a good the best option for him to go ahead and press charges. In this case, as the homeowners, we did not, but we very well could in the future. Again, this was the first time this happened. It was all in the moment. Oh, and I need to take this phone call. It's an intake. Okay, so let's see if I can get this train back on the tracks. I know I was already talking about know the property codes in your state and tenant laws. I think I was just saying that be careful, like in Texas, it sounds like even though a guest stay 7 days or less is considered a guest, that by the person indicating in any way that they have some kind of ownership rights to the property, just vocalizing that can cause it to be a civil issue and not a criminal trespassing issue. That's where I think I was going to go from there, is that if you do end up having to go through eviction proceedings, I was concerned about having to do that because I was under the impression that it could sometimes take upward of a year to deal through that and deal with that and go through all that process. Our mentors said, no, it's more like 30 to 35 days. However, it does cost about $1,250 to go through that process. So the takeaways from our first, what's the word? Police activity at the house and arrest are: one, be clear in our marketing and our criteria of who we're going to take in and stick to it. Reinstate having a lockbox somewhere at the property and not relying on the Wi-Fi locks. And three, getting better educated on the property codes and what to say and how to handle that when it comes up. Okay, I hope once again that this helps you guys. Thank you again for your patience with my rambling, but I hope it's been some benefit to you today. Take care.